People, Deluded, I'm back again. Thank you very much for tuning back in, people. Now, obviously, we've been linked with two players from Sampdoria, Joachim Andersen, hopefully I've said his name correctly. Forgive me if I'm wrong, which I probably am. And obviously, Dennis Praet, probably the more known of the two, in my opinion, purely because he's probably been on the scene long enough from Anderlecht days and that. Although, if you've been following football, Joachim's been getting a lot of, Joachim or whatever his name is, apologies, has been getting a lot of admirers, I'd say, within the last 18 months. Currently, you're seeing him linked with Milan. You're always seeing him linked with Spurs and us and a couple of other clubs. And when you do watch him and you look at his profile, he is a decent player, people. We've tried to do a double swoop thing. I've seen a lot of different fees. I'm just going to go with 42 million euros for the two players. They would both help us, man. They're both in their early 20s or whatever like that. Forgive me, Praet can't be any older than 24. He was around with Telemans. I should have actually checked his age. I know Joachim's 23, but let's see how old Dennis Praet is, people, quickly. Praet, or whatever his name is. He's 25, people. Alright, cool. He's 25, so that's still what? He's 25. Wow, that's ridiculous. We tried to sign him when he was 16. I remember. It's quite crazy how fast time goes, people. But he's 25, and the centre half's obviously 23, respectively. That would be two good signings for us in terms of longevity. Before we talk about possibly how either player could fit in, it gives us possible resale value and it gives us young players to work with as well. I know we're going a bit over the top, but if you just look at Joachim, for example, the centre half, you look at Leno, who's brought in, and for a keeper is very young. Leno's brought in. Socrates and Holding primarily will be the centre halves at least until the centre half is officially signed. So let's just say Holding. If it was Holding and this guy at centre halves, two guys in their early 20s, Leno isn't that old, Bellerin's in his early 20s essentially, assuming we get a new left back as well. And Kohler's not that old himself, but assuming we get a new left back in, that's a back five, which with me is an ideal scenario because you lot know I want a left back. So we get a defence in early on as well. Unai Emery can work with them, get them playing and defending the way they need to defend to better their season from last year. And then we can move forward and think about other stuff and things, but not before we learn how to defend. And on top of that, it takes years for a defence to really, really click. And these lot are fairly young, so we've got a young defence that could come into their age in a couple of years and stuff like that. And just finally a defence we could walk forward with. In regards to the centre half, I do like him, people. He's 6'4". Things that strike me, first and foremost, I have to say before I praise him, possible lack of pace could be a problem and inexperience. First and foremost, he's only played 42 times for Sampdoria, people. While I think he's a good prospect and a good player, you'd have to bear that in mind. Premier League, you've got some very street-smart strikers, regardless of ability. You've got Troy Deeney, who will try to get any possible advantage. You've got Rondon, you've got some poachers, you've got physical handfuls like, I know Mitrovic has been relegated, but him and Arnautovic. You've got people like Hernandez you won't see for 89 minutes and you think you've had a good game against him. He scores in the 90th. Obviously, he's been exposed to that in the top division. There's Llorente, who's a physical handful, and even if you saw for Delight, he was quite a problem when he came off the bench when Ajax played Spurs. But different sort of strikers, different characteristics. Centre-halves need to be exposed to them more and learn from it. So he will probably make some mistakes. I think he will play well, but we need to bear in mind that he's inexperienced and he's still learning and rough around edges. I think lack of pace, he's a good reader of the game, and if you've got a lack of pace, what's promising is that you read the game well, which he does. Possible lack of pace could come back to haunt him at times because he does play quite well in the high line. Obviously, Arsenal, we are quite a ball-playing side at times and we want to play with a high line. That's why you see our centre-halves on the halfway line, if you don't understand what I'm talking about there. And he does that, but again, he's not slow, but lack of pace could be a concern. I like how he makes interceptions. He is a good tackler, but his tackling probably could be polished up a bit. Main thing I like is his ball playing ability, and he's not afraid to get the ball high up the field and things like that. Emery probably thinks that's a bonus if it is true, these rumours. So I really do like him, man. Obviously we've got to allow him to grow and things, and I do, on the basis of he can't do any worse than any of the players that have been here, I'm all for it, but we've probably got to let him develop, people. And for me, it'd be promising to see if he was signing, or just assuming he's signing, him and Holding together. Yes, at times they will get destroyed and they'll be quite naive, because as much as I love Rob Holding, he's still quite inexperienced, so he is naive in situations. That would be a centre-half pairing that can grow. Socrates is here for maybe 3 years max, 2 including this 1 year gone now. Can give some be the experienced centre half for now. And it ties in probably with centre halves of their early 20s, which, regardless of it's the first choice centre half pairing or just depth purposes, you've got Mavropanos in his early 20s, Holding in his early 20s, Bielik, if he does stay at the club, in his early 20s, this guy in his early 20s. Regardless of what happens with Callum Chambers at this moment in time, it's there. So whether that's resale value, whether that's depth purposes, whether that's longevity, these are things you can look for, people. I've already mentioned the back line as well. In regards to Praet, we've been down the road, man. I think he would be a good addition in midfield. He actually wants to pass the ball forward and try and play decent passes. I think he's competent. I think he's built enough experience, because I think he's done it the right way. He didn't leave and come to Arsenal when he was 16 because he wanted to do his thing at Ajax and complete his studies. He got a found ground in there. He's been doing his thing for Sampdoria, so I'd love to sign both of them. It's been rejected, so at least for now, at least if it even is true, it's dead in the water. But if we can get something done, then I'd like the both of them, of course, people. Apologies. And a left back, personally, people, because yeah, for obvious reasons. But it depends, man. One promising thing is that we bought Torreira off them. We've obviously got decent relations. If we was able to get a deal done, they kind of know how we like to structure payments. Can we do something there? I forgot to mention it as well, but if I didn't, one thing I like about him as well, centre half obviously, is that he's 6'4", and again, I don't like to read into heights and all of these sort of things, but it would be nice to have that sort of physical presence in our back line. If you can imagine him at 23, if he develops, what could he be at 25, 26? I think, I'm not here to say a guy can be this, that and the third, but I think he can develop into a decent centre half. I think he is a good centre half. Like I said, the only negatives you could probably see is that on paper, statistically, he is quite inexperienced as a professional footballer, and probably recovery positions, in my opinion, lack of pace, they would be the ones, and he's not even that slow, but they'd be the one kind of, not weak marks, for want of better words, people, I can't find the right slogan for it, but they would be the kind of things I was looking for. But the positives clearly outweigh the negatives, and I'll be all for him. Spurs are always linked with him. If Arsenal do indeed want him, or Spurs do indeed want him, or Milan, only God knows, people. So it's probably just another rumour, but for now I'm going to keep it moving. People, thank you for watching and sticking with me, of course. Deluded, I'm out.